today for a talk is Dave Timnick, guitarist for Intronaut. The band has a new album called The Direction of Last Things, coming out on Century Media. Thanks for taking the time to talk to We Love Metal today.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. Hey, I've enjoyed listening to The Direction of Last Things for the last week or so. Seems to be a lot more aggressive than the last couple of albums.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think that was necessarily a conscious decision for us. I think we wanted to continue trying to evolve as songwriters, but I think that maybe we just thought that, you know, the last couple of records just weren't quite that heavy, and we just, based on the music we started writing for this album, we were all just kind of feeling a little bit heavier, I guess, but it was not any kind of purposeful, like, oh, we got to make sure this album's heavy because the last couple weren't so heavy. I mean, you know, it's just where we were at when we were writing, and that's just what happened.
Yeah, that seems to be the case with a lot of musicians I talk to. It's, you know, where they happen to be at a certain point, you know, personally or musically. So
exactly.
Even some harsher vocals came back. It kind of caught me off guard right from the get-go.
Yeah. Just so people don't think that we've gone soft or anything.
Also kind of talking about some sort of changes. I really, and not that I didn't notice it before, but the bass seems to be up front a lot more. Was that something you guys shot for, or just kind of happened in the music writing?
Yeah, you know, honestly, I feel like the bass has been kind of up front through most of our records. It's interesting you say that because there were some people commenting saying that the bass wasn't loud enough on this record.
Oh, wow.
I was thinking to myself, I don't know what kind of system you're listening to this through, but I promise you the bass is plenty loud.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I don't think, you know, it's not something that we like try to do, but Joe's bass, I mean, he plays a fretless bass, first of all, and
right.
his tone really just kind of like cuts, you know, he really likes a good mid and treble, bass response. So just based on the nature of the way he plays and the kind of tone he has, it really does cut through. And because we've got two big heavy guitars doing their thing a lot of the time, you know, we want to make sure that the bass really doesn't get buried or just sound kind of like it's strumming along playing root notes or something, because that's not really what it's doing.
Sure.
So I think we don't really try to make it especially loud or especially up front, but part of our sound and part of the mix that sits best for us, in our opinion, just kind of involves that bass really cutting through, because he's often not just, you know, playing what the guitars are playing, so we really need that counterpoint to
Sure. Speaking of kind of that, you're kind of getting into music theory here. It sounds like a little bit, but what really struck me too, another thing, one more thing about the album, the midsection on Fast Worms. You know, if you cut out those couple of minutes there and just play those alone, I would have said, you know, I'm listening to a modern jazz album with the guitar, the chord structures and the chord progressions, and then the running bass lines. So that's like a total, you know, dichotomy to that heaviness that the rest of the song encompasses. What kind of drove you guys to that?
Well, honestly, and if you listen back on older Intronaut records too, like, we're really constantly doing a lot of that. Joe and I both studied jazz a lot. I actually studied it as a drummer, not as a guitar player, interestingly enough. But you know, there's a lot of music theory and a lot of jazz theory going on, especially with Joe and the way he, you know, comes up with you know, certain approaches to chord qualities. You know, we do it even in heavy parts, we'll often create these chords where Sasha's playing one chord, I'm playing a different chord to make one big tall, you know, in jazz they're called tall chords, that, you know, are not common for people to be using, you know, in heavy metal music. So we do use it for heavy parts, but as far as that section goes, we do that a lot in the clean parts of our songs. That particular section of that particular song, we would go for this kind of like descending super hip jazz chord progression, and the little solo Joe was doing in there really honestly kind of started off as a joke. Like in practice he would solo over those chords, and we were like, knock it off, Joe, come on. And he just kept doing it, and eventually we were like, that's kind of cool, like, why don't we just leave it.
All right.
So yeah.
What song are you most proud of on the album?
I don't know, man. That's tough. I guess if I had to pick one, honestly, I would probably pick two. The first one would be the second track, Digital Gerrymandering.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm maybe a little bit biased in being proud of that one because I wrote that one. That was kind of like, that song was my little pet project, right at the beginning of the albums, because we write mostly all together, but Sasha and I kind of, especially Sasha, but more so myself as of late, kind of are bringing the skeleton of ideas to the table. But then everybody, by the time we all get our paws on all the different parts, everything changes. And,
sure.
And it's very, very much a democracy. But that song, just when we were starting to write the album, that song was kind of like my baby. So I'm proud of that one. But honestly, like as a band, I might say the fourth track, Unlikely Event of a Water Landing, just because it's a real departure for us in a lot of ways. A lot of that tune was inspired by our good buddy Ben Sharp, the guy behind Cloud Kicker.
Yeah.
Which is music we love, and he's a really good dude. So we were kind of listening to a lot of Cloud Kicker when that song came about. And I don't know, I feel like I love all the songs, but that one seems the most almost out of place, I guess you might say. But with us, with Intronaut, I feel like anything can be in place, even if it seems out of place. If we like it, it's going on the record. So
right.
That's what happened with that song. I had a lot of parts in that song where I wasn't sure if the dudes were going to like them or if it was even necessarily something that we would be using for Intronaut. But, everyone liked it, so it didn't really matter. Like, does this work for Intronaut or not? It's just, if we like it, it's there. So.
You mentioned Cloud Kicker, and I had that kind of as maybe an aside question. I wouldn't have even really paid attention until I heard, Intronaut is the supporting band. So, how was that little tour? How did that go? I mean, the live album turned out great, so.
Yeah, that was not a planned thing at all, that live album. The nature of how that all came about was we were touring, I forget what tour it was, but several years ago, and Ben came to one of our shows, and he was a fan of our band, and we get a lot of people that give us CDs.
Sure.
And we're like, oh, check out my band. And if people give us a CD and they just say like, hey, check out my band, we will absolutely listen to it. We always do. But if people give us their CD and they're like, hey, like, we're like, just like you guys, or like, we're a mix between you, and like, we see you got this tour coming up, like, when that happens, we just throw the CDs out the window. But short of that, we listen to everything. And Ben just came to one of our shows, and, he seemed kind of just the soft-spoken, nerdy guy. Was like, hey, this is my music. And we put it on the next day, and all of us were like, Jesus Christ, this is really good. I think it was the Beacons record. So we let him know that we thought his music was great. And then every time we came through Columbus, Ohio, where he's from, we would hang out. Or maybe not where he's from, but where he lives. And we used to kind of just tell him like, hey, like, are you ever have any intention of having a band behind this? And, he told us the same thing he told everybody always, just, no, not really. I just do this for fun. I mean, he's a pilot. He's a pilot for like Delta Airlines. And, he's like married, he's got a dog. Like, he's not interested in being a touring musician. So we told him way back then, we're like, well, hey, if you ever decide you want to do a tour or anything, we'll be your band. And he was like, well, it's good to know, like, I'm a huge fan of you guys. So if I ever decide to do that, I will let you know. So then, years went by, we did more and more tours, and then just I forget which tour it was, but it was, somewhere in 2014 or maybe, somewhere in 2014, maybe on the Meshuggah tour where we were coming through there and we hung out with him, and he just said, you know what, I think I want to do a tour. So we were like, okay, great. So we got the wheels turning. We had him put together a set list, send us music. and it just was just so happening that we were planning, you know, it was that block of shows right there, or I guess this was 2014, so it would have been 2013 where we were talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
But it all happened like over the course of like 3 months. You know, it wasn't a lot of planning that went in, not a lot of time that went into it anyway. So we had the tour with Between the Buried and Me, and then immediately after that, we were planning on doing our headlining tour. So we thought, hey, well, why don't we just do a tour where we'll play as Intronaut and we'll also play as Cloud Kicker. So it'll be Cloud Kicker and Intronaut.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, we just ended up doing that, and we were playing twice every night. I mean, we went after the Between the Buried and Me tour. We went to Columbus and we spent 3 days rehearsing with him. So we hadn't really, you know, we had all learned the stuff and we had played it ourselves, but we didn't even know if he'd be able to play it.
Sure.
And we didn't know if how he'd hold up, you know, to touring, you know, if he would just like hate it or if it would break him. You know, it's not you know, we're not, yeah, and also, you know, we're not like Motley Crue, 1988, you know, it's not all fucking cocaine and getting laid. So, you know, and he was great, super cool guy, you know, we all became very close, and it was really a blast to learn those tunes and play them. And so the live record, we were just on tour, in the middle of the tour, and this guy that lives on the outskirts and gave us an email or something and said, hey, like, I see you guys are playing in Dallas and then you're playing in Austin the next day. Well, you probably don't have time to do this, but if you come to Austin early enough the day of your show, or even if you come the night before after the Dallas show, I have a really nice studio at my house. You guys could come and sleep here. And I know it's a pain in the ass. You probably don't want to do this, but if you would load your stuff in and set up in my studio, I'll record you guys playing your set live. And even then when we thought, oh, hey, that'd be cool. So we went there after the show in Dallas. We got there at 4 a.m, slept for a few hours, woke up. This guy and his girlfriend made us breakfast, and we loaded all our stuff into their studio. We played through, you know, the songs just a couple of times to, you know, whichever take was the best. That was the one we used, but there was no punching in or editing or anything.
Right.
And then we just loaded out and drove into town and then loaded in and played our show in Austin. So we kind of thought, oh, this would be cool to just have this recording to use for something. And then, you know, we eventually just released it as the live record. So
yeah, well, it came out great. So
yeah, I'm pretty happy about that.
Back to direction. One of my musical heroes was involved, and you've probably gotten this question a number of times already, but how was it working with Devin Townsend?
Well, I'll be honest with you, we didn't actually work with him, like, personally.
Since he mixed it, I know it was kind of after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, part of, you know, we recorded this album, we tracked it live. We recorded it in 4 days.
Right. That must have been an experience too.
It was super stressful, but it was cool. I mean, we did it for 2 reasons. One, just because we're kind of a little bit over, everything that's happening with the recording in contemporary rock and metal and really just contemporary music. Like, I'm not sure when it became a desirable quality to have everything sound perfect on a record. It was never like that. I mean, you want a good recording. You don't want it to sound shitty, but where everything is snapped to a grid, where everything is cleaned up and you punch in every single part until it's perfect.
Right.
And all the vocals are auto-tuned to they're perfect. I don't know when that started, but I don't like it. We don't like it. So we really just thought, like, you know, kind of, we don't need a lot of time to record and we don't have a lot of money to spend in the studio. So let's just track this live, and we'll have more money. It's just cool to do it. You know, it kind of prevents us from even being able to, like, try to go in and make stuff, you know, too perfect or clean, even if we wanted to, which we don't. But, you know, it was like, okay, well, we better have these songs down. We better, you know, play the shit out of them because this is what's going on the record. And the other reason we did it was to free up more money to get a proper mix going, because we have not been thoroughly satisfied with, like, the sonic finished product of our last couple records. You know, we've had a hard time capturing the way we actually sound, which has kind of been frustrating. So we thought, if we can just track this record in a couple days, but track it, you know, obviously with, you know, get the good quality audio, then really have the money to have someone mix this that knows what they're doing and can kind of really get a feel for what we sound like and just make it sound like that. Make it sound like us. You know, we don't want it to sound like anything different or magical, you know, no sound replacing, no reamping, you know, just like take what we played and make it sound as good as possible. And there was a couple of different people who we were considering and bouncing around ideas. And, you know, someone just mentioned that Devin Townsend did a lot of mixing, and we listened to some of his records that not just his records, but any records that he's mixed or sound engineered. We're like, well, okay, this guy gets it. You know, let's see if he's interested. And he was very much interested. So it was cool. You know, basically it was all out of our hands. Normally in mixing, we're sitting there with someone and we're like, can you like, you know, we don't really know too much about it. So it's like, can be a very frustrating process. So we just handed our recorded tracks and we're like, here you go, like make this sound as good as it can. And I think he really did an amazing job. It's the first record for all of us where it finally sounds, just sonically speaking, the record that we want. You know, the way we want to sound on record. So
yeah, I did see you guys when you came through Chicago, I don't know, a year and a half ago or so. I think it was with Between the Buried. And yeah, it does have that live feel that you guys kind of deliver from the stage. So it's good to hear.
yes, indeed.
Speaking of Between the Buried, again, you guys are getting ready to head out with them one more time.
Yep.
With Enslaved and Native Construct. That's a pretty eclectic lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I really gotta hand it to Between the Buried and Me. Like, they get it as far as what tour packages should be like these days. You know, like they're a big band, but lots of big bands, you know, kind of just the way that touring normally works is that you just have like a headlining band, and then they just, you know, take out some support bands they like or friends or whatever. But like, it really is just, you know, a support band is really always just that, a support band, you know, like something for you to, you know, get into at your own convenience until the headliners come out. And Between the Buried and Me, even though they are the headliners, they really understand the idea of like putting together a real, like a serious show. Like they don't, and they're such cool dudes, you know, they're not like, hey, well, we're like, you know, the headliners, like who's going to be our openers? They're like, what kind of great, you know, show can we provide for people? So it's not just like, oh, hey, Between the Buried and Me was great. You know, of course they are, but like that show was great. You know? So they're really serious. They're really serious about good bands, you know, to make the package more interesting and more desirable. You know, same sounding bands. So yeah, I've been really impressed by just their approach to putting tours together for a while now. I think they really get it.
Yeah, because 3 of the 4 bands have headlined their own tours. I saw Enslaved earlier this year, and of course you guys do your own. So that's kind of a nice twist to it. Hopefully you'll get more than, you know, half an hour or so.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are just gonna have 30 minutes.
Oh, that's too bad.
But it'll be a hell of a 30 minutes, I promise you.
Well, that. No doubt. Okay. Hey, Dave, final question from me. Our website is called We Love Metal. Why do you love metal?
Why do I love metal? You know what? I think I must be the one guy in our band that, I mean, I grew up with, you know, Slayer, Metallica, stuff like that. But when everyone was in high school, like I was the last one to be exposed to anything that was like grindcore or death metal or black metal. I think the first like contemporary metal band I got into while I was, you know, becoming an adult was like Opeth. And I remember hearing that. I remember hearing them. And at first I heard like the vocals and was like, oh, I can't get into it. And then I heard the singing, and I heard how the music would go from one thing to another. And I ended up falling in love with them as a band. But I think to bring it full circle to answer your question, I think the thing that makes me love metal is that they're kind of off any rules. You know, you don't have to, you know, while everybody will, whatever you do, everyone will put it into a category. Like this is this kind of metal. This is kind of metal. And I guess you need that to a certain extent to organize, you know, genres or whatever. But one of the things that I love is that like most other styles of music, if you want to call it that, like really kind of have like a set of rules, like where if it's not following these rules, then it's not this music. And metal is almost, in some regard similar to jazz, not necessarily musically, but conceptually, because jazz doesn't necessarily mean, it's like, what are you talking about? Are you talking about Miles Davis kind of blue, or are you talking about, you know, some wild out free jazz? I mean, like, it's just a term that applies to like an approach to music. And I think it's similar with metal, where lots of different things are considered metal, but it's hard to always find a common thing that's like, oh, well, this is why it's metal. You know, there's kind of, you have the freedom to do whatever you want. And like with us in Intronaut, you know, we have parts of our songs you're like, oh yeah, like this is metal. Like this is what metal sounds like. But then, you know, like you mentioned, the super jazzy, weird breakdowns and stuff. And we just do that because we want to.
Yeah.
And technically, I don't know if that's metal, but by not being metal, that's metal. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I guess, you know, it's really like a freedom as far as like making any kind of heavy music, you know, it's a freedom to kind of find your own set of rules and do whatever you want. And I think that's pretty cool and pretty unique.
All right. Awesome. Hey, thanks for taking the time again. And to anybody out there listening, check out The Direction of Last Things coming out on Century Media soon, and catch the band on tour next month. Thanks, Dave.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, man. Have a good one.
All right. Take care.
You too.